Thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. My name's Paddy Moore, and I am the lead clinician in the abortion and contraception service at the Women's, but it's also my absolute pleasure and joy to be involved in another project which is called the Clinical Champions Project, and I'm involved in that with my lovely colleague Kath Hannon here, and that project is about improving sustainability of primary care workforce in regional Victoria. And I just want to share with you the joy that job has brought to me. And this lecture is my love letter to Victoria, because for the next little part of my career, I've been lucky enough to be funded to leave the hospital and travel into rural and regional Victoria and carry on the education work, which is all about empowering people such as yourselves. You are the people who've done all this work so far, and you are the people who'll continue to do the work. And I'm just here to celebrate that with you. It was 2013 that I first came to Shepparton. Some people are nodding in the audience. We're here in 2013. Thank you, Serge. That was when we really started things going in terms of could primary care practitioners provide early medical abortion. And I want you to feel, I'm hopeful that you'll feel at the end of the talk that we've come a long way. When Siobhan asked me to give the talk, it was a really long title. It was something about changing patterns of provision and the shifting landscape in abortion care. And there was one word that stood out for me, and that was landscape, because I love landscape. But I also love what landscape means. It's like the Earth's body, and it tells the history, and landscape doesn't change in an instant. So the metaphors for working in public health are enormous. So it was the landscape story that really got to me. And that's what I want to use to illustrate my points today. I wanted to make my own brief acknowledgement of country and an acknowledgement of the art scene in Shepparton. It's phenomenal. I've just drove past the new art museum that you've got, and I will be sneaking off there later today at some point. When I first came to Shepparton after we'd given our talks, I did spend quite a bit of time in the art gallery there, and I was so impressed. And then I visited the Aboriginal Kayala gallery as well. I'm blown away by the street art. So I just wanted you to see these works. If any of you haven't seen them thus far, go around and have a little look. So these are acknowledging the elders that are so important to the development of the landscape in Victoria, in the North of Victoria. So Auntie Margaret Tucker, who was an advocate and was one of the first Aboriginal women to actually receive an MBE. And Nora, or Nanny Charles, who was one of the first midwives who walked the Murray and delivered babies in the camps. Pastor Sir Douglas Nichols, who was not only a legend on the field, on the AFL field, but was also the first governor who was Indigenous, the first Indigenous governor of South Australia. Barbara's nodding. And William Cooper, who was a strong advocate, spoke out all of his life about genocide, including the Nazi genocide. And I think it would be lovely to honour his moment in history today. These are painted by Aden Nate, who's a well-known muralist, and he has been very much involved in the silo art, which I've also explored as I've wandered around Victoria. When we think of landscape, we tend to quite often think of the Victorian landscape artists who came as part of the first colonial push, this sort of classical landscape. This is Mount Arapiles by Nicholas Chevalier. Yeah, please shout out when I have shown your landscape. I would really like that. And I guess a caveat of my talk is that there are so many hubs now, there are so many workers, there are so many services that I'm only mentioning a couple. And the reason I'm only mentioning a couple is because they're the ones that I've got images or I've had a relationship with that land myself. So this is the beautiful Mount Arapiles. It looks like an empty landscape. We know that that took millennia to form and takes millennia to change. But landscape isn't just a picture representation, it also can be figurative. And so I'll just swap to the landscape work of a great friend of mine, Safina Stewart, who is an Aboriginal painter from the Basque Coast and an educator, and she uses her landscape paintings figuratively. This is Bunjil, the creator, and in her language, Bunjil created the Murray River by flying over, and when his wing touched the ground, he created the Murray River. She's also very beautifully, figuratively put in place all of the communities that she sees and the interlinking webs. Almost looks like a hub and spoke model, doesn't it? Yeah. So landscape can mean lots of things, and she's using that diagram figuratively, but she's also really emphasizing that land is about place, and people are about place. So when we visited Shepparton in 2013 and started to talk about developing services, things felt pretty bleak. It was just around the time that I had started my job at the Royal Women's Hospital as the head of abortion services. And I thought I would just, rather than have a didactic talk that tells you all the things that we've developed, I thought in the last week I've had 3 very important phone calls, and they're so different than the phone calls that I used to get. So I thought I'd share some of the phone calls that I used to get, and then bookend the talk with the phone calls that I've had in the last 3 weeks. So I talk about this as the era of dark secrets. Mari Clark is a local artist. She's a Yorta Yorta woman, and she hails from up near the Murray. She's actually a member of the Stolen Generation. And she's done a great deal of work. She's the first Indigenous woman art curator in Australia. And she's done an awful lot of work transforming our concept of what landscape is. So she does installations that are also about landscape. This is a story of Mel from Moe. She presented to the Royal Women's Hospital in 2012. She came to the Welcome Centre because the ALO officers were right next door to the Welcome Centre. She came on the bus with her 4 kids. She came because somebody told her the Women's would help her. She was fleeing domestic violence. She was 18 weeks pregnant, and she'd nowhere to go but us. And I was called down to see her. I call these the turnaway years. I used to work in a place called the Back Door in Melton. Anyone here from Melton? The Back Door is legendary as a primary health care clinic. It ran after hours, after school. You didn't need a Medicare card. Your parents weren't involved. We got a call from Sally, the school nurse, to say that she had a 14-year-old with her who wanted contraception. And Sally's phone call was, "Can I get her to see you? But does she have to tell her parents? The school says she does." And when I examined the young person, her fundus was at the umbilicus. So these were the years when we were turning patients away because their gestation was too great. When I came in 2013 here to this beautiful area and did this the talk at the Women's, it was post-abortion law reform. The Royal Women's Hospital was the biggest public provider. Abortion care was the single largest reason that regional women travelled to a tertiary hospital to have procedures that were a simple curette performed on them, procedures that all O&G trainees learn how to do, that could be easily devolved into services in regional hospitals. But they were travelling to the women's, travelling 3 or 4 hours for a curette at 7, 8 weeks. That seemed insane to me. We had limited access for later gestation, although the law said that women could request abortion up to 24 weeks for any reason. 5 years post-abortion law reform, we were turning women away at the gestational age of 18 because it was hospital policy. And that involved a lot of cultural change to try and get them to allow us to do the training and then provide those services. The gestational limit was really at odds with the legal system at that stage. There was no post-24-week pathway for non-maternal or fetal indications. I really, really hate the term psychosocial abortion, because every abortion is performed because there's a crisis in the family, whether it's a fetal anomaly or whether it's family violence. They're all psychosocial in some dimension. But that division between good girls and bad girls really existed at our hospital at that point. The Pregnancy Advisory Service, could I just do a big shout out for the Pregnancy Advisory Service at the Women's? They were a counselling and information service who moved from being a counselling service to being primarily the state referral service. But they didn't have enough services to refer to, and it was mainly privatised. So thank you, Serge, for organising the conference in Shepparton. Momentum was definitely gathering at that stage. Women's Health Victoria was a peak body and continues to be a peak body in advocacy. And they had just delivered a report slamming the inequities of sexual and reproductive health delivery in the regions, showing that beyond the ring road, there was very little in service delivery. And that was a very important seminal report. In 2012, TGA finally did the right thing and registered mifepristone. Prior to that, you had to apply for a special license, which was almost worse than getting my fellowship all over again. It was like 75 pages. And Ian Mulligan from rest in peace, Ian Mulligan, one of my mentors from South Australia, she took me hand in hand and took me through those pages so I could become a licensed provider. How far we've come now that we see that we've got rid of all of those ridiculous obstacles. So we knew that we had to respond to the training needs because this had huge implications. If it was being registered for general use, as it should be, a drug like any other, that meant that we were wanting general practitioners and primary care practitioners, advanced nursing and midwifery practitioners to prescribe and to give out this drug, but we needed to do some training. And so if we were going to do some training, why not do it in the regions as well? Now this sounds like, you know, a no-brainer, but it was very, very radical at the time. And my boss at the time who hired me for the job, who gave me the poison chalice of working in the abortion service, she said, I think you could do it, you know? I think we could do it, and I think they're ready to do it, and I reckon let's float it at this conference. So thank you very much to Chris Bailey, who's now enjoying being a creative writer post-ONG. I've always loved Sidney Nolan, and I've always loved the mythology that he explores. So this is Ned, looking at what appears to be an empty landscape. I'm going to push the metaphor a little bit too far to say that the rifle is mifepristone. Okay? We'll just push it a little bit too far. But what he's really saying is, I reckon you fellas need some resources. So you need rapid access to info and services. You need workforce training as one of your horizon goals. You need a statewide referral service, definitely a horizon goal. And you need hubs. That's what you need. And we got them. In 2019, Kath and I travelled to Gippsland, and as Paul up the back will know, I have the worst geographical skills in the world, and made even more embarrassing by my lack of sense of direction. And I refer to Gippsland as near Gippsland, far away Gippsland, or far, far away Gippsland, depending on how far the patients travel. Kath and I travelled through a landscape where there was a storm, and then when we were in Sale, we visited the Sale exhibition of this gentleman's Gippsland paintings. And Fred Williams really revolutionised how we think about landscape. He stopped worrying about being a representation of the land and how it looked, but it being a representation of what it made you feel. And it was driving all that way to Gippsland, to go to Sale, to really experience how far patients come to see me. And I make the appointment at 8:45. And I raise an eyebrow when they're a bit late. This is a lightning storm over Waratah Bay. And he really, by doing it like a cartoon, you see the progression of the lightning across the land. I don't think Fred would mind if I showed this as a timeline of development. So with the lightning in each of the bits, yeah. I was going to do a mountain range, but I couldn't do the fiddly bits. So in 2008, that's abortion law reform. Where's my pointer? Abortion law reform happened here, a lightning strike, but things still hadn't happened by 2013, but we were starting to look at training then, and we had the TGA regulation. By 2015, we had been really involved in advocacy with the Department of Health, and by 2017, they had developed the Sexual and Reproductive Health Plan, which was after years and years of work by many of the people in the room and constantly speaking truth to the landscape. It's not happening outside of Melbourne, and it's not happening very well in Melbourne either. In 2018, we had the launch of 1-800 My Options. Could I just have a round of applause for 1-800 My Options, which has been an incredible service and has become that statewide referral service and has become a model for other states to copy. And then in 2020, we had the pandemic, which provided a whole lot of new opportunities. That's when we finally got our act together with telemedicine. And telemedicine's been absolutely revolutionary. In 2023, we had the final deregulation. Advanced practice nurses can prescribe mifepristone, and it's on the PBS for the price of a script. But there's still plenty of work to be done. So we started going to visit places, and as I say, the places that I'm just talking about that have been very influential, partly because I have images of the landscape artists in those areas. Wodonga is one of them, and the Gateway team in Wodonga responded really rapidly to just one evening education session. The clinical leader blocked out the GP's clinical time, made them sit and do the MS2 step training, pointed them at a patient and said, "You're on." And that's where they started. And they moved from that to coping with the closure of the Albury Clinic, which was run by a doctor who flew in and flew out from Melbourne. It's a nurse-led clinic. It's still a nurse-led clinic. They liaise with the local hospital for surgical services and backup for EMA, and then we started to provide IUD training for them, and they keep on doing that, and that's reiterative. So like Bendigo, like Lou's service in Bendigo, they are a super hub. So they now train the next generation. And those models have all been based on local solutions to local issues. And I'd invite anybody in the audience to make a comment about their local solution from their hub. So the current model of provision, I've used, again, another young Yorta woman, Chloe Jones, because I thought this organic landscape really kind of illustrated the going along the highway and the development of large centres and then smaller centres. So the way a society starts to build towns and smaller centres can be mirrored in the way that you, the people in the room, are building the hubs and then the other connections to primary care, to school nurses, to all of those people who are meeting patients. We now have 20 hubs. The first hubs were opened in 2015. We now have 20. Workforce training remains a priority. We've got growing numbers of primary care providers of EMA, and we now have nurse practitioner and endorsed midwifery provision for providing early medical abortion. And I don't have a picture of the landscape around Maryborough, but I would really like something from Maryborough, so I could talk about Maryborough as well. And I probably need to go back and explore the landscape there a bit more. But the work that the team have done in Maryborough is also phenomenal. They weren't even a hub, but they just did it. They just copied. And they're really going very well there. Hospital provision is greater now than it was, and some of the smaller centres are providing surgical services, albeit not a list. They've embedded it into their practice, but their gestational limits are still, I think, too small, too early, and we really need to work with that group to develop service training there. Department of Health directives have been very helpful. A stick and carrot approach has been used. It's not perfect yet. There are still plenty of examples where certain areas are completely underserviced, and some areas in metropolitan Melbourne also underserviced. But let's focus on the 3 phone calls I got this week as we start to close off the talk today. I just want to have a little bit of a shout out for the young guns of the Wimmera. So back to the gun imagery. This is a painting by Sydney Nolan of Lake Dimboola up in the Wimmera. And recently we've been doing some training, as follow-up training to early medical abortion provision, which goes hand in glove with providing long-acting reversible contraception. And we've come to meet and know the nurses from the most recent hubs up there, the area of Horsham and Ararat and around that area. And we've also met some really, really great young doctors who didn't grow up in medicine in the era of abortion stigma as I did, and so think nothing of providing mifepristone and misoprostol when it's needed. They just don't have that issue with it that we seem to have to overcome. And so they're trained in either in DIP-OBS or there are GP obstetricians who can perform minor surgery, and they're wanting to provide early medical abortion, but they're also wanting to provide the surgical backup for that service and first trimester surgical abortion, with a view to being upskilled by us to provide early second trimester abortion. And they didn't know about the hubs, and the hubs didn't know about them. So one of the few things that does happen as part of our travelling roadshow that we do from time to time is that we introduce people. And so the phone call I got this week was from one of those young doctors saying, I've just done an MTOP, the beta HCG's dropped really fast, so can I get the Kylina in this week instead of next week? Just thought I'd check with you. So that's the kind of adventurous problem solving that they're coming up with. The other story is about EMA on the GOR. GOR is the Great Ocean Road. That's where I first fell in love with Melbourne, and I know it's not Melbourne, but it's what enabled me to continue to live in Australia, having come from New Zealand, was that sense of space and water and wet forests and things. But the Great Ocean Road is also one of the most man-made structures in Victoria. And a factoid about the Great Ocean Road was, although we think a lot of explosives were used, in fact, very few explosions were set off, most of it was chiseling. And doing that road often, because I have a place down the Great Ocean Road, it feels like this. It feels like a dipper, particularly at night if one of your headlights is blown. It feels like an adventure. We recently had a phone call from a GP as a follow-up from a 17-year-old girl somewhere along the Great Ocean Road, I won't mention where, in year 12. She Googled, abortion, I want one, and she got 1-800. It came up as the first option. And so she rang them, and she's very happy for me to share today that she had such a, and these are her words, comforting experience. That something I needed and wanted was validated, and my privacy was maintained, and within 10 minutes I had several referrals. So she was referred to a GP in Torquay who has decided as a result of that consult that she really needs to provide IUD service backup. And so she's now going to commence her training with us in August. So these bits of synergy are all part of this great sweep on the GOR. This picture is for Kath. So Malakuta is Kath's happy place. Andy Sutton is a great friend of mine. He's an artist who lived near where I used to live. He also had a residency on the Great Ocean Road. So his work is being represented a little bit much because I've got more of his work than anybody else. And this is his depiction of the inlet at Malakuta. And I haven't been there yet. And I'd like to go and check out the veracity of that image. But why I'm using this image is to introduce the things that we haven't done right yet. I don't know a public health screening service that has no backup diagnostic testing or action other than for antenatal screening of aneuploidy. Why is that? If your breast screen is positive, you get told where to go for your biopsy, and you get linked into a service, which is one of the most sophisticated and beautiful services, Breast Screen Victoria, thank you. Why is it not so that when you have a positive NIPS test, that you don't know where to go for the amnio? So this patient from Malakuta that I was phoned about, she had her NIPS at 10 weeks, which is the absolute minimum time to have it. There was a 2-week wait because there was a holiday in between somewhere there, 2-week wait to get the positive result. She had to have 2 different GP appointments until somebody suggested that they ring together 1-800 My Options because they didn't know where to send her. The local service said it's too late for us. And so 6 weeks later, she attends the Royal Women's Hospital for a surgical abortion. Not good enough. It's not right. And that is one of the biggest areas that I think now I need to think about us in advocacy pivoting towards that is an inappropriate response. More and more indications for screening are happening, and patients are being dumped at 1-800's doorstep. And I hear you, and I really hear you about this, and I think that's the next thing that we need to do. The strategies that have worked, and I know I'm nearly there, the strategies that have worked have been training, advocacy, community of practice, and you are the community of practice. I have a plug slide for OzCaps, and I think they have a stand as well. Please join them. They are a nationwide funded service, and it's free information. They are very up to date with all of their research. Major challenges remain. I've got a big to-do list. I've talked about improving services post-screening, but we also need to really focus on direct referral models so patients don't have to go to GPs. We bypass conscientious objection because you just know where to go. I see lots of nodding. Point of care ultrasound and one-stop abortion services are the future. So too is just in case medication abortion. So you get scripts the same way as my doctor gives me scripts that I can use when I have a migraine. I don't need to go and get proof that I've got a migraine. I can take a drug it's in my pocket. Why can't I do that if I have a positive pregnancy test? These are the future. EMA provision models, telemedicine, remote and very early medical abortion are all coming, and some of you have already started those models, and we will keep pushing on those. And then, of course, the regional surgical service provision. So there's plenty still to do, but I would like to return to my theme that the landscape is changing, albeit slowly, and it's going to take long effort, and it's going to take effort way after I've retired and way after all of you have retired, but the momentum is there. And I just want to thank you all for the work you do.